You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's start off with JJ Starling. He's got 1 year of eligibility remaining. He averaged 18 points a game last season on 41% shooting from the field, 27% from the three-point line, which is not very good, and an Evan Maya defensive rating of 0.14. Would I like JJ Starling back? Would you like JJ Starling back? I think most people, including myself, would say yes. We would happily take JJ Starling back. There's probably going to be a lot of turnover this offseason with Syracuse's roster. I believe that it's important to have at least one or two veteran leaders on a team, especially because Syracuse basketball is retaining head coach Adrian Autry. So you want someone who is at least familiar with Adrian Autry, especially with all the new players that are probably going to be coming into Syracuse. So yes, I think we all, for the most part, want JJ Starling to come back. But the $1 million question is this: will he come back to Syracuse basketball? I'm leaning yes. I would not be necessarily surprised if he entered the transfer portal, but I am leaning yes. If you recall, this is someone who is from Baldwinsville. That is not very far from Syracuse. He transferred to the Orange after 1 year of Notre Dame as a true freshman. He spent the last 2 years here. It's hard to envision him leaving. It's not impossible. And I do think that Syracuse is going to have to step up its NIL in order to keep JJ Starling. But as an early prediction, I think that JJ Starling will return to Syracuse next year. Let's move on to Chris Bell, who also has 1 year of college eligibility remaining. He averaged 9 points a game this season on 35% three-point shooting, and he had an Evan Maya defensive rating of negative 0.46. That was the worst rating on the team. Chris Bell also had the worst plus-minus of any player on Syracuse this season at negative 127. Oof. Would I like him back? Would you like Chris Bell back? It's been 3 years, and I think we've seen all there is to see about Chris Bell. I don't. I don't want him back. Again, we're talking about him as a basketball player, not him as a person. I think it's time to move on from Chris Bell. And the question is now, will he be back? And I'm also leaning towards no. I think both parties are better off going their separate ways. I would not be surprised if Chris Bell transferred elsewhere and all of a sudden became an all-around player. He just could not develop necessarily at Syracuse. It's unfortunate. Maybe he will be back. Maybe he won't. But I'm leaning towards no. So that's Chris Bell. Now we got Donnie Freeman. Donnie Freeman has 3 years of eligibility remaining. He was the highest ranked Syracuse basketball recruit since Carmelo Anthony. And in his true freshman season before he got hurt on January 4th, he averaged 13 points a game and 8 rebounds a game, shot over 50% from the field and 33% from the three-point line. He also has an Evan Maya defensive rating of 0.42. Would I like him back? Would you like him back? I think for the most part, absolutely. True freshmen like Donnie Freeman do not grow on trees. I understand for some of you all, he may not have lived up to the hype of being the best recruit since Carmelo Anthony to come to Syracuse, but he averaged 13 points and 8 rebounds as a true freshman. Those guys don't grow on trees. And oh, by the way, you got to figure he can only get better from here. That there is a lot more room for improvement. I think he can become a better outside shooter. I think he can become a better defender. He's got the length to be a better defender. So I would be thrilled if Donnie Freeman returned to Syracuse basketball next year. Will he be back is the question. I am 40-60 on this. I think there is a 40% chance that he comes back, and I think that there is a 60% chance that he either decides to enter the pros or decides to enter the transfer portal. Regardless, If Syracuse basketball wants to keep Donnie Freeman, they're going to have to step up NIL in order to do so. Same thing with JJ Starling. Now we get to Elijah Chopper-Moore, and it's going to be controversial here. I'm warning you right now. He's got 3 years of college eligibility remaining. He averaged 5 points a game this season, 32% from the three-point line. He had an Evan Maya defensive rating of 0.96, which was actually the highest rating on the team. But nobody was really a good defender on Syracuse this season. That would have been the 5th best rating on Syracuse last year. Would I like him back? This one's controversial. It makes no difference to me. If if Elijah Chopper-Moore decides to stay with Syracuse, all right, let's hope that he can develop. If he decides to enter the transfer portal, okay, I'm not going to lose sleep over it. I understand that there is potential with Choppa, and he did display some flashes this season. That game against Tennessee was really cool. He was the lone bright spot in that game. But I was not wowed by Elijah Chopper-Moore in his first season with Syracuse. Maybe he can improve, but I'm just saying I will not lose sleep if he decides to enter the transfer portal. Will he be back? I'm leaning towards yes. I think he will. But we also talked last night in the post-game reaction after SMU. What's his role going to be next year? Because if JJ Starling returns and you have Kiyan Anthony coming in, maybe Syracuse also brings along a transfer. What is going to happen to Elijah Chopper-Moore? Not sure. So we'll see, but I am still leaning more towards yes. As far as other players that are eligible to return, you got Kyle Cuff in a Noon's Magician article earlier today. He did say that he plans to come back. You got Chance Westry. Unfortunately, injuries just completely derailed his career at Syracuse. And you got Peter Mastorovich. I love his energy. I love his effort. His ability is just not there yet. He needs to definitely develop in the offseason and into next season as well before he really becomes a big piece of Syracuse basketball. I do think he overachieved relative to expectations because, let's be honest, I don't think many of us had any expectations on Peter Mastorovich. It makes no difference to me whether or not he decides to stay or leave, but he's most likely going to stay. I can't see him leaving. Doesn't really make a lot of sense in that regard. So those are the players that are eligible to come back. We went in order: JJ Starling, Chris Bell, Donnie Freeman, Elijah Chopper-Moore, Kyle Cuff, Chance Westry, and Peter Mastorovich.